Have you ever felt like the people who raised you were quietly rooting for your failure? Like they dressed up control as love and called exploitation responsibility? If you've ever been used by family under the disguise of support, then you'll feel every word of what I'm about to say. My name is Carrie, and at 25 years old, I learned what betrayal really looks like when it comes gift-wrapped in white paper. The envelope sat beside my plate like a threat. My name typed in all caps, centered, cold. No handwriting, no warmth, just sterile precision. Dad didn't even look at me as I picked it up and opened it. $2,500 a month, he said flatly, like he was reading out a utility bill. Includes rent, internet, electricity, and your household contributions. I stared at the breakdown. At $200 rent, $400 utilities, $900 household contribution. At the bottom, due on the 1st. Late fees apply. Across the table, my younger sister Amber twirled her pasta with freshly painted nails, her phone glowing with some influencer's skincare routine. She didn't glance up. But Amber doesn't, I began. Mom's voice cut me off, smooth as honey but sharp as glass. Amber is still finding her direction. You, Carrie, have 2 jobs. You're stable. It's time you learn real responsibility. Stable. That word hit harder than the invoice. Stable, because I hadn't had a day off in 6 months. Stable because I worked 8 to 4 at the bank, then rushed to the restaurant until midnight. Stable because I skipped breakfast, clipped coupons, and lived in the same childhood room I'd painted at 10 years old. When does this start? I asked quietly. Next week, Dad replied casually. We trust you can manage. Mom tapped her fork against the rim of her glass. And late payments come with a $50 fee. Just like the real world. I nodded, because what else could I do? I folded the paper with shaking hands, slipped it into my pocket, and excused myself before the wait cracked me open. Upstairs, I opened my laptop and stared at my bank balance. Not great, but not empty. I created a new spreadsheet titled Rent Receipts. Downstairs, Amber laughed at her phone. I added another column, Expenses they don't pay. I thought I was learning their lesson. But the truth? I was about to write my own. The next morning, I woke up before dawn, dragged on my uniform, and headed to the bank. On the bus, I kept rereading the invoice like maybe I'd miscalculated. But no, $2,500 wasn't just steep. It was deliberate. At lunch, I vented quietly to my coworker Lena, who'd become the closest thing I had to family outside blood. They're charging you more than a 1-bedroom downtown, she whispered, eyes wide. For your childhood bedroom? I gave a humorless laugh. Yeah, guess I should be grateful they're not asking me for security deposit. Lena shook her head. Carrie, that's not parenting. That's exploitation. They're squeezing you because they know you won't walk away. Her words sat heavy in my chest. Walk away? From my home, my memories, my Amber. Even after everything, I couldn't imagine leaving her behind in that house with them. When I got home that night, the contrast hit me again. Mom was curled on the sofa, scrolling through furniture catalogs. Dad was sipping whiskey like a CEO, and Amber had new sneakers, limited edition. $300 a pair. Cute shoes, I said, my tone sharper than I meant. She smirked. Thanks. Dad got them. Said I deserved a little treat, a treat. Meanwhile, my dinner was instant noodles in my room. That night, I stared at my spreadsheet. $2,500 out, $3,200 in if I worked both jobs full hours. That left me with $700 to survive. Food, transport, savings, emergencies. No room for mistakes, but something shifted inside me. For the first time, instead of thinking, how will I manage? I thought, why should I manage at all? And that's when the first spark of revenge lit up in my head. The next week was a blur of work, bills, and biting my tongue. Every time I handed over cash to Mom for rent, I felt my stomach twist. They didn't even bother hiding what they did with it. New curtains, spa trips, Amber's dance classes, even Dad's upgraded golf set. Meanwhile, I was rationing shampoo like it was liquid gold. One night after work, I came home to find Amber sprawled on my bed scrolling my phone. Excuse me? I snapped, snatching it back. She rolled her eyes. Relax. I just needed to check my TikTok real quick. My phone died. Her phone, by the way, was the latest iPhone. Mine was 2 models old, paid for entirely by my second job. That's when it clicked. This wasn't just about unfair rent. This was about control. They wanted me dependent, drained, and too tired to question their rules. So I decided to flip the script. The next day, I opened a new bank account under just my name. No joint signatures, no way for mom or dad to snoop. I rerouted my paycheck directly there. When mom asked for my ATM receipt just to keep track, I lied smoothly for the first time. "Oh, the bank's been glitchy. They didn't print receipts today." She frowned but didn't push. That tiny act of rebellion gave me a rush I hadn't felt in years. For once, they didn't know everything. I started small, bringing home groceries I bought with my own money and labeling them with my name. Hiding my best clothes in a locked duffel bag under the bed, even secretly applying to apartments across town just to see what was possible. Each step was fuel. Each lie, each secret stash of savings, it all made me feel stronger. And all the while, I smiled at them like the obedient daughter they thought I was. They had no idea the girl they were milking dry was planning her escape. And her revenge. By the time September rolled around, my secret account had a little over $4,000 in it. Not enough for full freedom yet, but enough to give me courage. At dinner one night, Dad casually mentioned, "Carrie, your rent is going up to $2,800 starting next month. Inflation, you understand." Amber giggled, stabbing her fork into her steak. I kept my face neutral. "Of course, Dad. Makes sense." But inside, I was screaming. Inflation? No, this was greed wrapped in excuses. The next morning at the bank, Lena slid me a flyer across the counter. "Hey, my cousin's renting out a small studio. It's not fancy, but it's clean and way cheaper than what you're paying. Want me to connect you to?" For the first time in months, I let myself smile. "Yeah, actually, I do." That night, I sat in my room pretending to study bills while secretly running numbers. If I took the studio, my rent would drop to less than half. I could breathe, save, live. But moving out wasn't enough. I didn't just want freedom. I wanted them to feel the sting of what they'd done to me, so I began documenting. Every ridiculous invoice Mom sent me, every text from Dad demanding money, every condescending message from Amber bragging about the things they bought with my rent. Screenshots, photos, notes, all tucked neatly into a hidden folder on my laptop. And I started telling people, gently planting seeds. At work with Lena. At church with Mrs. Henderson, who adored me. Even with my old high school friend Rachel, who still lived nearby. I didn't spill everything yet. Just enough truth to make people raise their eyebrows. Because when the time came, I wanted the whole world to see my parents for what they really were. Greedy, manipulative, cruel, and I wanted Amber to realize Daddy's favorite little princess wouldn't always have someone else footing the bill. 2 weeks later, I visited the studio Lena's cousin had told me about. It wasn't glamorous, just a single room with cracked white walls and a tiny kitchenette. But when I stepped inside, it felt like mine. No one barking at me, no invoices taped to my door, no sister lounging on my bed. Just quiet. I ran my fingers over the windowsill, dusty but open. My own window, my own space. "This is freedom," I whispered. "The rent? $100. Not cheap, but less than half of what my parents demanded. The landlord, a kind middle-aged man named Mr. Patel, even said, 'If you pay on time, I'll never bother you.' It was everything I needed. That night, I cooked dinner at home and watched Mom and Dad gloat about Amber's new ballet recital dress, paid for with my money. Mom waved her wine glass. "Amber deserves the best. Not everyone is cut out to be a star, Carrie, but at least you can support her dreams." Amber smirked. Dad nodded proudly. I chewed my overcooked pasta and thought, you have no idea what's coming. Over the next month, I quietly boxed up my essentials and carried them to Lena's car during late-night bank shifts. Clothes, toiletries, the duffel with my laptop. Slowly, my room became emptier. But I didn't stop paying rent, not yet. I wanted them confident, comfortable, certain they had me trapped. At the same time, I updated my folder of evidence. Receipts, screenshots, even a recording I caught of Dad boasting on the phone. Yeah, we've got her paying almost $3,000. She won't leave, she's too soft. Each file was a weapon, carefully sharpened. And when Amber barged into my room one evening to steal my perfume, I smiled sweetly and handed it to her. Take it, it's yours. She laughed, thinking she'd won. But inside, I was already gone. And soon they'd feel the emptiness I had felt for years. Moving day came like a secret holiday. I told my parents I was pulling an overnight shift at the bank, then loaded the last of my boxes into Lena's trunk. The drive to the studio felt like flying. Every mile between me and that house loosened a knot inside my chest. When I turned the key in my new lock, I nearly cried. My space, my rules, my life. The next morning, my phone buzzed. 20 missed calls from Mom, 6 from Dad, and 3 angry texts from Amber. Mom, where are you? Rent is due. Dad, you think you can just run? Don't come crawling back when you fail. Amber, wow, thanks for abandoning your family. Guess I'll have to survive without your money. Oh wait, I will because Dad loves me. I laughed so hard I nearly spilled my coffee. But I wasn't done. Remember that folder I'd been curating for months? I printed copies. Every invoice, every screenshot, every recording. I slipped them into neat envelopes. One for HR at my dad's company. One for the church pastor who constantly praised my model parents. One for the family group chat that included every aunt, uncle, and cousin. The subject line of the email version? The truth about life in our house. I hit send. By evening, the fallout had begun. Aunt Cheryl called me first. Carrie, honey, I had no idea. They always said you were freeloading off them. I swallowed the lump in my throat. Now you know. Soon, Dad's boss got hold of the recording where he bragged about extorting his own daughter. Word spread. Mom's social circle shrank overnight. Amber posted a teary TikTok about being betrayed by her sister. But the comments weren't sympathetic. Most people called her spoiled. For the first time, the power shifted. They couldn't control me with shame anymore because I'd exposed them with truth. And as I sat in my tiny studio, eating takeout on my own floor, I felt freer than I ever had in that big, suffocating house. By the end of the week, the cracks in their perfect facade were wide open. Dad's company put him on administrative review after the HR envelope made its rounds. Turns out bragging about exploiting your own daughter doesn't sit well when you manage payroll for a bank. The irony wasn't lost on me. Mom, who lived for her social brunches, suddenly found her invites lost in the mail. Mrs. Henderson from church, sweet, kind Mrs. Henderson, apparently confronted her in front of the ladies' group. How dare you treat Carrie like a tenant? A daughter is not a paycheck, she'd said, loud enough for everyone to hear. And Amber? Her meltdown was legendary. When Dad's card got flagged during one of her shopping sprees, she called me sobbing. Carrie, please, can't you just send me a little? Just until Dad sorts things out? I almost felt sorry for her. Almost. No, Amber, I said softly. Maybe it's time you learn what things really cost. Click. That night, I curled up on my mattress on the floor, eating cheap pizza and laughing harder than I had in years. Revenge wasn't about flashy scenes or dramatic screaming matches. It was this, watching the empire they built on my back crumble under its own weight. But then came the part I hadn't planned for. They started begging. Mom showed up at my studio door one Sunday afternoon, mascara streaking her cheeks. Carrie, sweetheart, we miss you at home. Amber's been so lost without you. Your father? He's under so much pressure. We can work something out. I leaned against the doorframe, arms crossed. Work something out? Like another invoice? Or maybe a discount for being your daughter? Her face crumpled, but I didn't flinch. For the first time in my life, I wasn't afraid of her tears. I didn't let Mom inside. I stood in the doorway, calm, steady, while she pleaded. We were only trying to prepare you for the real world, she sniffled. Life is expensive, Carrie. You needed to learn. I tilted my head. By draining me dry so Amber could live like a princess? Her silence said everything. Behind her, I spotted Amber sulking in the car, scrolling on her phone like nothing had changed. Dad wasn't even with them, probably too ashamed to face me, or too busy scrambling to save his job. I let Mom ramble for a while, listing excuses, spinning lies. Finally, I cut her off. "Here's the deal," I said. "I'm not coming back. I'm not paying you another dime. And if you harass me again, I'll send every shred of evidence I have straight to the local paper. I don't think Dad's company, or your church, would survive that kind of press." Her mouth opened and closed like a fish, but she didn't argue. "Go home," I finished. "Take care of Amber. You've already chosen your favorite." Then I closed the door in her face. Inside, my chest shook, not from fear but from power. For once, I wasn't the quiet, obedient daughter. I was the woman who had survived them, and who refused to be broken again. Weeks passed. Dad eventually lost his managerial role, shuffled into a lower-paying desk job. Mom stopped posting family photos online. Amber had to get a part-time job at a cafe, and word was she hated every second. As for me, I decorated my studio with secondhand furniture and fairy lights. I worked, saved, and even applied for night classes. Every day was still a grind, but now every dollar I earned was mine. And sometimes, when I walked past a mirror, I barely recognized myself. Not because I looked different, but because I finally saw someone free. Someone who had won. Freedom has a strange taste. It's quiet, sometimes lonely, but also sweeter than anything I'd ever known. My studio was far from perfect. The sink dripped, the radiator rattled at night, and the walls carried the faint smell of the last tenant's cigarettes. But every flaw reminded me this was mine. I worked late hours, sometimes collapsing into bed without eating, but each day I woke up knowing I was building something for myself, not funding someone else's life. That difference changed everything. Still, my old life clawed at me. Dad called at least once a week. At first, his voice thundered through the phone. "You'll regret this, Carrie. No one turns their back on family and wins." But I didn't hang up. I let him rant, and then calmly replied, "I already have." Mom's approach was different. Her voicemails were long, shaky monologues about forgiveness. "We're still your parents. Families fight, but blood is forever. Come home. Let's start over." I never replied, and Amber, spoiled, smug Amber, fell the hardest. She sent me angry DMs about how miserable she was now that Dad had cut her allowance. "I can't survive like this," she wrote once, as though working a part-time job was punishment worse than death. She even showed up at my workplace one afternoon, pouting in her cafe uniform. "Carrie, just help me until I get back on my feet. Please." I looked her straight in the eye and said, "Amber, I worked 2 jobs so you could wear sneakers worth more than my paycheck. Now it's your turn to learn what work feels like." Her cheeks burned red and she stormed off. But inside, I felt lighter than ever. Because for once, I wasn't the one begging. It took months before I had the courage to walk past my childhood home again. The once perfect house looked tired. The rose bushes Mom used to boast about were withered. Paint peeled from the shutters. The driveway was empty. No shiny cars, no signs of the perfect family they'd paraded to neighbors. For a moment, a pang of sadness tugged at me. This was the house where I'd learned to ride my bike, where I'd decorated my room with glow-in-the-dark stars. But that nostalgia didn't last, because the truth was clear. The house wasn't a home. It never had been. It was a cage and I had broken free. I didn't stop. I kept walking, clutching the strap of my worn bag, breathing in the crisp air. Every step forward was proof I was stronger than the girl who once cried over invoices taped to her bedroom door. And with every passing day in my studio, I built more than just independence. I built a future. I saved money, I signed up for night classes in accounting, I even started sketching out what my own business could look like one day. That was my real revenge. Not just exposing them. Not just watching their world collapse. But thriving in spite of them. My parents wanted me broken, obedient, and scared. Instead, they created a woman who refused to bend. So yes, they taught me lessons, but not the ones they intended. They taught me how cruelty sharpens resilience. How silence can be more powerful than screaming. and how sometimes the family you're born into is just the first obstacle you have to overcome. I closed that chapter. I walked into my future, and as I strung up one last set of fairy lights in my tiny studio, I whispered to myself the truth I had earned. I am free. I am stronger, and I have won.